In today's video, we're looking at some NHL trade rumors focusing on the Montreal Canadiens, Toronto Maple Leafs, Detroit Red Wings, Washington Capitals, New York Rangers, as well as the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll jump into all the latest trade rumors coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some NHL trade rumors I wanted to discuss with you here today. A lot of the information is coming from the latest edition of NHL Insider Trading on TSN, as well as a few other articles that I've sourced here today as well. I want to kick things off starting with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, the Leafs are in an awkward position here with a lot of their decor banged up, with Jake Muzzin being out, Morgan Rielly being out, both long-term. Rielly very well could be out till the end of the regular season, start of the playoffs. It's really hard to say. Were they given a prognosis of a minimum of 8 weeks? So that's certainly bad news. So according to NHL insiders, the plan for the Leafs here to address their defense would be to get through the next few games, because they do have their bye week as well as the All-Star break coming up, where they're going to have an extended stretch of time off. And apparently there is some optimism that once they return from the All-Star break, that Jake Muzzin could possibly be back. So obviously that could impact how they go about handling this. Of course, they know the status of Rielly is going to be out, like I said, till near the end of the regular season. And of course, they're going to give youngsters like Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren a chance to fill in as well and see how things go. I know Sandin made a really solid impression in last night's win over the New Jersey Devils, so he certainly looked pretty solid there. But part of the issue here is that the guys that are hurt are left shot defensemen, which is more the immediate need now. But at the same time, it's the right side that they're more concerned about from a longer term basis. I mean, as many of you probably know and realize, the Maple Leafs have a lot of unrestricted free agents on that blue line, and there's a lot of question marks on who is going to be back and playing on this roster next year. A couple of key pieces like Tyson Barrie, for example, as well as Cody Ceci, who played 2/3 of that right side, are unrestricted free agents and very well might find themselves in a different team next season. And so they really would prefer to have, ideally a big-time right-shot defenseman join the team if they could. But like I said, right now it's the left side. So how do they go about doing that? They wouldn't want to use too many assets to acquire a temporary defenseman when they might need to make a bigger move to address the right side longer term later on. So it's kind of tricky to see how Dubas approaches this, but obviously a lot of that will be determined by the return of Jake Muzzin. If they can get him back off through the All-Star break to get one of their top left side guys back, if Sandin can fill in relatively well, they may not do much of anything, and at the same time prepare to address the right side more so like they have been likely here all along. But based on what Bob McKenzie was saying, he wouldn't be surprised to see them take one of their affordable contracts in a forward position like an Andreas Johnsson or Kasperi Kapanen or even an Alex Kerfoot. Those seem to be the three names that he mentioned that are kind of getting the most interest around the NHL, that they very well could trade one of them for a similar size contract. Ideally, a right shot defenseman would be preferable. McKenzie says the Leafs have certainly been getting lots of calls since these injuries started to pile up. Other teams who want to shop defensemen are calling to see what they have to offer, but so far, obviously nothing has really materialized on that front. But clearly other teams are trying to take advantage of the Leafs situation and move a player off that they would like to move on and obviously get their hands on one of their solid young forwards who very well could be the asset going back the other way. So I guess we will kind of go into the wait and see approach. But like I said, if Muzzin can come back and Sandin can fill in nicely over the next little while, I would imagine Dubas kind of sits tight till we get closer to the deadline, and then possibly, and I only stress possibly, see a move for the right side of the decor. But that's also a move that doesn't have to happen now. I mean, if they're happy with Barrie and Ceci, they very well could go with them and make a move in the offseason and address once they know their status of their contracts moving forward. So we'll wait to see what happens here with the Maple Leafs. Now jumping over to the New York Rangers, the latest talk here on pending unrestricted free agent winger Chris Kreider, who certainly sits near or at the top of the trade bait board around many lists around the NHL. There's recent talk from Pierre LeBrun on Insider Trading that the Rangers, if they decide to move him, very well could retain up to 50% of his salary and might be willing to do that to kind of entice a bigger return for the power forward. Now, certainly that's going to be quite intriguing and interesting to some of the top teams around the NHL, specifically teams like the Bruins and the Blues, maybe even the Avalanche. I know they couldn't really link the Avalanche to Kreider according to their sources, but I know there's been lots of talk on social media and Avalanche fans that they need to make a big move. We've seen lots of talk and speculation about the Avs, like I said, between online, social media, and whatnot, but a lot of it is really just fans talking and kind of coming up with what they think they should do. But the Blues and the Bruins have been linked to making a big move here for some time, so that certainly would be quite interesting, quite intriguing. I think both those teams have some interesting assets that they very well could move back to the Rangers. I mean, the Rangers have had some of their prospects come along nicely, and some of them have kind of stalled and obviously haven't quite worked out. And of course, they got Elias Anderson in there, who still possibly could be moved as part of a package deal as well. He may not necessarily be traded with Kreider. That could be a separate deal. It's really hard to say what they do with Anderson in that case. But clearly the Rangers are in a position where they haven't ruled out re-signing Kreider, but it's certainly having that salary retention in their back pocket to increase the value. Certainly something to keep your eye on. But it certainly might help some of the stronger teams put together a better package of return going to the Rangers should they decide to make the move. Now, obviously, we've seen this week that Nicholas Backstrom has re-signed a 5-year deal with the Washington Capitals, and immediately one of the big questions that comes to mind is what does that mean for pending UFA goalie Braden Holtby, who's been a really big part of this franchise, big part of their Stanley Cup win, and certainly his future seems uncertain to say the least. It's already been acknowledged that he and the team have decided not to talk contract throughout the season. They were going to leave it to the end of the year. But with Backstrom taking an over $9 million average annual value, that's not going to leave a lot of money for goaltending. And with the emergence of Ilya Samsonov, who's played so well this year, you can't help but wonder if it's time for the Capitals to move in a new direction and Braden Holtby to hit the UFA marker this summer. You also have to wonder if the big contract like we've seen Sergei Bobrovsky get last summer will be available by any team, considering how that's working out so far. I know it's still early in that contract, and maybe longer term it could prove to be pretty good. But when you have guys like Bobrovsky and other top-paid goaltenders like Carey Price, for example, making so much money and not getting the job done to that level, I would think it certainly would give a lot of teams cold feet on handing out a big-time goalie contract. Now, Pierre LeBrun suggested that perhaps the only way for Holtby to return to Washington would be on a short-term contract where he would be willing to take less money on a 1 or 2 year deal or something. They might be able to squeeze that in and figure out a way to make it work. But if he's looking for that longer-term security, like a lot of players his age would, then he's likely is going to hit market, and that Backstrom contract is basically going to push Holtby out of town. I really doubt he gets traded before the deadline. The Capitals are a really strong team, certainly going to be in contention for a potential another Stanley Cup. They're certainly going to be in the running for sure. I don't imagine we'll see any moves in that regard, but I do see Holtby's future in Washington likely ending after the season ends. It's certainly going to pose a lot of questions where he could end up for sure. Now, another part of that as well is with the Seattle expansion draft coming up, they very well might want to be able to protect Samsonov, which obviously wouldn't be good for Holtby either. So a lot of these contracts that we're going to see done this summer are certainly going to have a lot of the Seattle expansion draft in mind when they are in teams preparing for their protected list for the following year's draft. So I guess we'll see what happens with Holtby, but I think his time might be coming to an end with the Capitals. Now, next up, I want to take a quick look here at the Detroit Red Wings. They're certainly in a position where they're basically bottoming it out and hopefully landing the top pick overall is certainly what they could use. And I'm sure that Steve Yzerman would like to see that happen for his franchise. But they are certainly quite open and willing to move a lot of their pending unrestricted free agents, which certainly includes goaltender Jimmy Howard. You get Franz Nielsen in there, a few defensemen like Green and Daly. The only problem is there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of interest around the league. And even if there is, come trade deadline day, I think Yzerman's going to end up selling quite low. We're probably looking at late round picks or maybe a B or C level prospect or something to that effect. But either way, Yzerman's looking to continue to make the team younger and get more and more young assets into their organization to kind of kick this rebuild here and hopefully take it up a notch next year as well. Now, as I mentioned in the other video today with the Vegas Golden Knights making a coaching change, I can't help but wonder if the Red Wings might go down that path as well. If not now, then at the end of the season, and if Gerard Gallant might be a candidate there, considering how well he's worked with a lot of these younger players, how well he did with Vegas, kicking things off when their inaugural season going to the Stanley Cup. The fact that he's well known by Steve Yzerman and certainly somebody who they've played together a long time. So, couldn't help but wonder, but we also could see Gallant end up in Seattle as well. That would not be shocking if they come calling his name now that he's available, considering how well he did to get the Vegas Golden Knights franchise off the ground here in their first couple of years as well. But in regards to the Red Wings, they would like to make some moves, but the only problem is that the team is playing so poorly, there's not a lot of interest, and if they are sold off at the deadline, it's likely going to be for next to nothing. With Vegas here momentarily, obviously, like I said earlier today, we saw a coaching change with Gerard Gallant being fired, and Peter DeBoer, former Sharks coach, taking over. Now, I'm quite surprised we saw this move. I really thought we'd see some trades out of Vegas. There hasn't been a lot of talk lately, but I know earlier in the season there was some talk that Vegas would really like to add a defenseman. Their goaltending hasn't been as good this year. I'm not going to fault Marc-Andre Fleury too much for that. I know his numbers aren't quite what they were at one point, but at the same time, I know he's got a lot going on personally, and I don't care what anybody says. I'm sure that's impacting his play here, at least to some degree. But from a backup goaltending perspective, I really don't think that Malcolm Subban has been consistent enough between last year and this year. I'm kind of surprised they haven't tried to make an upgrade really from that position before this. So I guess we'll see what happens here with Vegas. But now that they have a new coach behind the bench, wouldn't be surprising to see if they try to make some upgrades here to get into that playoff spot. Clearly, they're a team in contention for the spot, but at the same time, they're in a really bit of a rat race there in the Pacific Division. There's a lot of teams battling for only a few spots. Not sure any of them are going to get into the wild card race. Due to the Central Division being so strong, not sure that they're really going to be able to get a wild card spot. They really need to secure themselves a top 3 spot. They're only 3 points out, but that's the difference between being in first place and being out of the playoffs. So I guess we'll see what happens with Vegas, but I know there's lots of defensemen around the league that are available. Perhaps one of them could end up in a Golden Knights uniform. We'll see if Kelly McCrimmon and George McPhee make any additional moves to give Peter DeVore some extra support to see if we can get this thing turned around. And lastly here, I want to touch on the Montreal Canadiens. We've had a lot of talk lately about them making a big splash, some big trades with some big-time players like Carey Price and Shea Weber. A lot of talk, really, for the most part, just from fans saying should they or shouldn't they, and that whole debate with all that being riled up online lately. I just want to touch on the fact that TSN Insider Trading did touch on this as well with all the online talk. And Pierre LeBrun, who talked to Marc Bergevin about this, where Bergevin reiterated that he has absolutely no intentions of trading either of his star players. He thinks the leadership they bring is extremely important to the team, and by no means would he want to do that. But I will caution you this, as I've said many times before, GMs are not going to come out in an interview and say, yes, I want to trade this player, that player, here's are my plans. They're never going to do that. And secondly, people swore up and down for a long time that he would not trade PK Subban when there was a lot of chatter about him. Even Max Pacioretty in the early days, there was a lot of talk they were going to, and he denied that. That's just common for GMs. Like, he's not going to come out and do that. So would it be shocking to see Marc Bergevin make a big trade? To a degree with those players, yes, it would. And I even downplayed the rumors myself. So I don't think there's really anything to them. But at the same time, I do understand why there's a talk about should they or shouldn't they. But it's really, for the most part, that is just fans expressing their opinions, and there's not necessarily a lot to it that way. And Colorado Avalanche fans also got a lot of that riled up as well, because a lot of them was talking online about they should go after Carey Price. Now there's a lot of reports online saying the Avalanche should go after Henrik Lundqvist. I'm not really sure that they have a lot of confidence right now in their goaltending, and they feel that one of these former star goalies with a lot of experience and obviously quite a pedigree in the past would be an upgrade to get them to the Stanley Cup. And I'm just not sure that that's really what they need. I mean, they're both great goaltenders in their own right, but really, I don't know if that's really what the Avalanche need. I understand the concerns in goaltending, but to go after a mega contract like that, this doesn't make sense to me. The Avalanche, I think, need to go in a different direction. Perhaps a goaltending change of some sort is something they can look at, but those are not the answers in my opinion. But just want to update you all that Marc Bergevin says that Price and Weber are going nowheres, and we'll have to wait to be seen here if that's actually the truth, or what will happen with the franchise moving forward, as they are at risk for missing the playoffs for the 4th time in the past 5 years. So of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts and opinions on everything we discussed here today, so make sure you leave lots of comments down below and let me know what you think is going to happen ahead of the NHL trade deadline. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turning on your notifications, and checking out our membership features as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.